Welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, Filippo Ganna has broken another world record. The European road season draws to a close. Davide Rebellin finally calls it a day, and the UCI Cyclo-cross World Cup continues in the USA. This week in the world of racing, we learned that Filippo Ganna now holds 3 world records. The team pursuit from the Olympics last year, the hour record from just over a week ago, and now the individual pursuit. His performance at the Track Worlds last week was mind-blowing. More on that later on. We also learned that Fem van Empel is the new badass of cyclocross. She took her second win from 2 World Cups last night and was the only rider able to bunny hop over the barriers. And finally, we learnt that the European road season has officially ended. The Veneto Classic yesterday was dominated by UAE team Emirates, who've had a brilliant end to the 2022 season. The race took on a brand new climb in the Diesel Farm, which is home to the fashion brand. And yes, you've guessed it, it was on gravel. Not everybody's cup of tea, I know, but it was actually pretty fun to watch, even if it wasn't that fun to ride. Mark Hirschi pressed the pace on the lower slopes of that climb, but Nicola Conci of Alpecin-Deceuninck was not only able to match him, but also gap him. Now, the problem for Conci was that Hirschi's teammate, Davide Formolo, was able to close the gap on the climb, whilst Hirschi did exactly the same thing on the descent. But it wasn't a trio for very long. Hirschi immediately hit the front, and by the time they came out of the Diesel Farm, he had an advantage of 7 seconds over those behind him. Conci was left in the unenviable situation of having one UAE rider up the road and another one glued to his wheel. On the final climb of the day, Formolo attacked him, and whilst he was unable to catch Hirschi, it meant a 1-2 for UAE Team Emirates on the day and a total of 4 riders in the top 10. And that was the 48th win of the season for that squad, putting them level with Jumbo-Visma for the most wins of any team in 2022. Their 47th win had come a few days earlier in the week at the Giro del Veneto, where most eyes were on Mathieu van der Poel. He was a surprise addition to Alpecin-Deceuninck's roster the day before the race. However, he didn't feature much during the race and was ultimately a DNF. Up at the front, a group of 5 riders pulled clear on the climbs, and they'd fight for the win between them. Lopez, De Marchi, Vecher, Rojas and Trentin. Now, last year, Trentin finished runner-up in both the Giro del Veneto and the Veneto Classic, but this year he was not going to make the same mistake. The Italian chased down late attacks from De Marchi and Rojas, as was his responsibility as the fastest sprinter in that group, and ultimately he had no problem sprinting to the 29th win of his career. On to the boards now, as it was the UCI Track World Championships in Saint-Quentin, France last week. 5 days of absolutely brilliant racing, I've got to say. There's so many events, obviously, that I won't be able to go through all of them, but I will go through what I felt were the highlights of the 5 days. And I'm going to start with the men's team sprint, which the Dutch have dominated for the last few years, to the point where it looked almost like they could not be beaten. That finally happened on Thursday evening, though, with the Australians taking the win, albeit by just a 1/10 of a second. In the women's team sprint, the Germans took the title for the 3rd successive year, breaking the world record in the process not just once, but twice. Their time of 45.967 seconds in the final bettered their 2021 marker by a 1/10 of a second, and it means that the trio of Grabosch, Friedrich and Hinze have set 5 world records in that discipline in the space of just under 12 months. Their average speed for their latest record? 60 kilometres per hour from a standing start. Absolutely remarkable. Now, the most impressive performance of the week, for me at least, came off the bike. 20-year-old Marie Divine Kouame caused one of the upsets of the championships by beating Emma Hinze in the 500-metre time trial. But her enthusiasm in singing the French national anthem on the podium was something else. If you didn't see it at the time, here it is. Absolutely brilliant. I love that. Kouame's gold medal was the second for the French after Mathilde Gross won the women's sprint the day before. She'd beaten 2 titans of sprinting en route to that win, Emma Hinze in the semi-finals and Leah Friedrich in the final. The men's Omnium all came down to the final points race. Ethan Hayter went into that in the overall lead, and whilst he never really looked threatened, the fight for the silver and bronze medals made for gripping viewing. And it all came down to the final few laps. Benjamin Thomas got away from the field with Hayter, and on the final lap made the junction with the back of the pack, giving him enough points to secure the silver medal. The atmosphere in the velodrome was absolutely bonkers, but it was even better yesterday at the end of the men's Madison. The French had the gold medal secured late in the race after lapping the field, but 4 teams were tied for second place as the bell rang to signal the final lap of the event. It does not get any closer than that. In that final sprint, Great Britain did enough to take the silver medal and Italy the bronze. We had a similarly exciting finale to the women's Madison. Lotte Kopecky and her partner Shara Bussait were trailing by a large margin early in the race, but got themselves into the lead when they managed to lap the field. France put in a last-ditch effort to take the gold, but came up short by just a single point. And that was one of 2 gold medals for Kopecky over the 5 days. She also won the elimination race, whilst the men's elimination was won by Alia Viviani. On to the pursuits now. In the women's individual pursuit final, Franziska Brauser of Germany took an early lead, only to see it wiped out by New Zealand's Bryony Botha. Incredibly, Brauser then found the strength and power in the closing stages to turn the tables back in her favour and take the gold medal. In the team pursuit, Italy took gold after taking an early lead on Great Britain, who were never able to get themselves back on terms. I shall finish track cycling with the men's pursuit because there were some incredible stories played out there. In the team finals, Olympic champions Italy were up against Great Britain, who hadn't won that title since 2018. And what I found most interesting was that Filippo Ganna was in the Italian team and Dan Bigham in the British squad. Bigham was the mastermind behind Ganna's recent and very successful world hour record attempt. So to then be on opposing teams fighting for a world title must have been quite a strange dynamic. Great Britain took the lead in the closing stages of that team pursuit, and despite Ganna's trademark turn at the end, Italy were unable to get on terms. It's been quite the year for Dan Bigham, who himself broke the world hour record back in August, and who at 31 has just won his first ever world title on the track, having been ignored by British selectors for so many years up until now. Ganna got his own back though in the individual pursuit. He faced fellow Italian Jonathan Milan in the final, but the excitement came not from the matchup, but from the time Ganna might set. In qualifying, he just missed out on going under 4 minutes, but in the final, he did it, and in the process beat Ashton Lambie's world record. 3 minutes, 59.636 seconds, the first sub-4 minute pursuit at sea level, and when you look at the numbers, it really is incredible. Dr. Xavier Disley was once again on hand to break it all down with the graph. Ganna rode a negative split, just as he did for the world hour record. His penultimate lap was the fastest. There he averaged 63.9 kilometres per hour, which is just a shade under 40 miles per hour. After the first kilometre of his event, he never dipped below 62 kilometres per hour. And so he goes into this off-season with 3 world records under his belt. Have a good rest, Filippo. You have certainly earned it. At the end of the championships, it was the Netherlands who topped the medal table with a total of 4 golds, 4 silvers and 2 bronze medals. Harry Lavreysen took 2 of those gold medals in the carrying and the sprint events, whilst Jeffrey Hoagland won the kilometre time trial. Italy finished second on that medal table. They also took 4 golds, but had slightly fewer silver and bronze medals, whilst France and Germany were tied in third. Track cycling will continue later on this year with the second series of the UCI Track Champions League. There'll be 5 rounds in total this year. The first is in Mallorca on the 12th of November, followed by Berlin a week later, Saint-Quentin in France on the 26th of November, and then the final 2 rounds a week after that in London on the 2nd and 3rd of December. And the format of the racing will remain the same as last year, with events equally split between sprint and endurance, men's and women's. That means a total of 8 events per round, the carrying and sprints, and then for the endurance riders, the scratch and elimination. All of that squeezed into 2 hours of non-stop action each evening. Now, we're yet to have confirmation of exactly who will be competing there, but you can be fairly sure that the majority of those crowned world champions last week will be in attendance. And I've got to say, I'm really looking forward to it starting again. Right, moving on, and I will let you know now what we've got coming up for you on GCN Plus this week. And it is officially the off-season for roadies. The Tour de Langkawi wraps up tomorrow with the 8th and final stage, and that's the end of the road, if you will excuse the pun. However, the cyclo-cross season is now very much in full swing. On Sunday, it's the third round of the UCI World Cup and the first in Europe, so a quick turnaround for the riders who made the trip over to the US for the first 2 rounds. It's taking place in Tabor in the Czech Republic, where Lars van der Haar and Lucinda Brand took victory in the men's and women's events respectively this time last year. Those races will be available to watch on GCN+ if you're in Europe, excluding Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Italy, Belgium and the Czech Republic. Later on today, if you're watching this show as soon as it comes out, we've got the live presentation of the 2023 route of the Giro d'Italia. Now, we already know that the first stages are in the Abruzzo region, but rumours have suggested that the opening day's individual time trial will be the first of 3 at next year's race. We'll find out whether that is correct and which famous climbs they'll be using next year during the presentation. Now, if you haven't got time to watch that, I will be back tomorrow with a wrap-up of the route and again looking at which riders might favour that route in 2023. Beyond the racing, our documentary this week is about the art of cornering, something that might be worth watching even for a few pro riders. Here's our trailer.
What does it really take to corner safely but at speed?
Il freno a disco cambia tutto, ti dà quella sicurezza che frena subito.
Is cornering fast something I can perfect, or is it just natural instinct?
To show you some corners fast.
Hey, don't kill me, yeah?
Dead man's corner as an example, with front wheels in a pothole, you're putting your head in a bush and you're just hoping you can come out the other side.
After learning from the best, I'll take on a challenge that'll push my cornering ability to the absolute limit.
This techie is always a little bit of nerves. You're not sure how far you can push it.
That documentary is out tomorrow on GCN+. Tour de Langkawi now, where the first 2 stages ended up in bunch sprints. The first of those was won by Astana stagiaire Gleb Sirista, who looks more like a track sprinter, I've got to say, than road, while stage 2 was initially won by Sebastian Milano of UAE Team Emirates. However, about 6 hours after the stage finished, Milano was relegated to last sprinter in his group after the UCI commissaires analysed this incident in the closing stages. Milano clearly taking his hands off the bars to push Raymond Crader out of his way. A clear violation of the UCI rules, so definitely the correct decision, even if it did take quite a long time for them to come to it. Genting Highlands greeted the riders at the end of stage 3, a mountain that's long been the main decider in the general classification of the Tour de Langkawi. The crowds on that climb were absolutely humongous, which was great to see. Ivan Ramirez Sosa and Hugh Carthy were the strongest climbers on that day, but when the Colombian attacked inside the last kilometre of the stage, Carthy unfortunately had nothing left to respond. That marked the 3rd win for Movistar in October alone. They've really had a fantastic end to the 2022 season. Jakob Mareczko was back to his winning ways on stage 4. He's now had 47 career wins, and the vast majority have come in Asia. The breakaway had their day on stage 5, with Lionel Tamino taking another win for Alpecin de Koenig there after out-sprinting Julius Vandenberg of EF Education Easy Post. We had yet another sprint on stage 6 of the race with a new name at the top of the table. Erlend Blikra of Denmark took his first professional victory there, and with that, he got himself a contract extension with Team Uno X. The second GC showdown was supposed to be today, but unfortunately, the weather gods got in the way of that. Flash floods had caused landslides in the area, and so the organisers were forced to reroute. That stage is still ongoing as I record this, but you can watch it on demand on GCN+ if you haven't seen it already. The race will conclude with the 8th and final stage this time tomorrow. Cyclo-cross now, and the US trip concluded for many yesterday with the second round of the UCI World Cup in Fayetteville. In the women's race, we had some familiar names up front: Brandt, Betsemer, Van Empel, Worst and Alvarado, until a gearing problem saw Alvarado lose contact. For the rest, it was a similar story to the week before. Brandt did everything that she possibly could to distance everybody else, but Van Empel was every bit her match. Now, the advantage Van Empel had on everybody else was that she was the only rider who could bunny hop over the planks. She did it on lap 2, which nobody else saw except for the rider just behind her, Anne-Marie Vorst, and she did it again on the final 2 laps of the race. Now, it didn't win the race for her, but it did mean that the others had some catching up to do on both occasions. Nearing the finish, though, it looked like Van Empel might have got things wrong. Brandt continued to dominate the first spot of the race, whilst Wurst had managed to get herself into second, and try as she might, Van Empel simply couldn't get past. However, in the end, it did not matter. Even coming from third place in the downhill sprint to the line, Van Empel had more than enough power to come past Wurst and Brandt to make it 2 wins from 2 in the World Cup, 4 wins from 5 in the season so far. And she's still only 20 years of age. Scary. In the men's race, Iserbyt was unable to pull clear as he had done in Waterloo a week earlier, and for a large part of the race, it was a large group trading blows at the front. In the closing stages, 3 riders got a gap over the rest: Van Torenhout, Iserbyt and Sweeck, all 3 of them teammates last season, with Sweeck moving on to give himself more opportunities this season. And what an opportunity it was for Sweeck last night. Going into the race, he'd had 48 top 10s at World Cups, but never a win. On the final lap, he attacked the climb, dropping Van Torenhout, but not Iserbyt, and it was those 2 who were locked together coming into the final sprint. Sweeck led it out, but then heartbreakingly, he was unable to keep Iserbyt behind him, with the Belgian also making it 2 from 2 in the UCI World Cups this season. I've got to say though, I felt so bad for Sweeck, and I think almost everybody watching was cheering the underdog there. Van Torenhout completed the podium, but just 7 seconds behind him, an American. Eric Brunner put in the performance of his life yesterday in front of the home crowd, and his 4th place there is a new record for an American male rider in a UCI Cyclo-cross World Cup. The previous best was a 6th place from our very own Jeremy Powers in Las Vegas back in 2015. So well done to you, Eric. The only non-Belgian Eric was in the top 9 on the day. Absolutely fantastic. In other news, Ineos Grenadiers have made a new signing. Last week, they confirmed the signing of their first ever female rider, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot. Not a signing that I think many people saw coming before the rumours started circulating this time last week. The signing is part of a drive, we understand, to increase their presence in off-road disciplines. And what better way to do that than by signing a rider who's currently world champion in 4 of them. What will be interesting, though, is whether this means that Pinarello, the team's bike sponsor, are developing a new mountain bike. The only ones that they currently sell are e-mountain bikes, and if there's one person in the world who does not need that extra assistance, you've got to say it is Pauline Ferrand-Prévot. In other equipment news, Jumbo-Visma, who've used Shimano for as long as I can remember, are moving on next year. They are going to be using SRAM drivetrains and group sets. There are also rumours circulating around that UAE Team Emirates are considering changing from Campagnolo to Shimano, so a bit of a merry-go-round on the equipment and group set side of things at the moment. More news on that as it comes. There's a new women's professional cycling team set to start competing as of 2023, and it's called the Synisca Cycling Team. They have dedicated themselves to advancing women in cycling in all aspects of the sport, and they've been working very closely with USA Cycling to do exactly that. The majority of the team will be made up of North American riders, and on their roster, we've got some junior and world champions. And finally, Davide Rebellin has ridden his final professional race. He finished in 30th place at the Veneto Classic yesterday, and now, at the age of just 51, he's going to call it a day. So over the last 30 years, somebody online worked out that he's had over 1,500 race days. He's done more than 260,000 kilometres in races and has a total of 61 wins. And in his last race, yesterday, over 80% of the riders who started were not yet born when Davide Rebellin started his pro career. That was back in 1993. Enjoy retirement, Davide. You have certainly earned the rest. I'm actually off for a rest this time next week, but you'll be in the capable hands of Connor Dunn for the Racing News Show. I'll see you again in a couple of weeks' time.